Hey everybody, this is Bob Kovacs here at Wirefly with Wirefly's Mobile Madness all March long. This is when you get to pick the winners of some of the best phones in the industry. This is the Sprint bracket, and on the left we have the HTC EVO Design, and on the right we have the Samsung Epic 4G Touch. These two phones have a few things in common and many things not in common, so let's get started. First of all, these are both 4G phones using Sprint's 4G WiMAX network. The EVO Design has a 1.2 gigahertz single-core processor and 768 megabytes of RAM. The Epic 4G Touch has a 1.2 gigahertz dual-core processor and 1 gigabyte of RAM. So the Epic 4G Touch gets in a couple of three-pointers with its faster processor and greater amount of RAM. Looking at these, clearly the EVO Design is smaller. It has a 4-inch diagonal display versus the 4.5-inch diagonal display over on the Epic 4G Touch. However, the EVO Design has resolution of 540 by 960 pixels, while the Epic 4G Touch has resolution of 480 by 800 pixels. So even though the display is smaller on the EVO Design, it has higher resolution than the display over here on the Epic 4G Touch. But we're not done talking about the displays yet. This is an LCD display. It's a good crisp LCD display. However, this is an AMOLED display, and AMOLED displays, many of you will know, are among my favorite displays. It really is a very pretty display. So, which do you go for? Do you go for higher resolution with LCD or lower resolution with AMOLED? This is when you guys get to make the call for Wirefly's Mobile Madness all March long. Now, both of these phones have cameras. This is a 5-megapixel camera here on the EVO Design. It can do 720p HD video. And on the front, it has a 1.3 megapixel front camera for video chat. You could also take photos and video with that front camera as well, although not HD video with the front camera. On the Epic 4G Touch, it's an 8-megapixel still image camera, and it can do 1080p HD video. On the front of the Epic 4G Touch is a 2-megapixel camera, and it's also perfectly good for video chat, and it also can be used to take 720p HD video from the front camera. Let's keep going. Now, for onboard storage, the EVO Design has 4 gigabytes of onboard storage. We have 16 gigabytes of onboard storage over here in the Epic 4G Touch. However, the EVO Design comes out of the box with an 8 gigabyte micro SD card in its micro SD slot. So this comes out of the box with 12 gigabytes of storage. Over here with the Epic 4G Touch, 16 gigabytes of onboard storage is all you get out of the box. However, it does have an SD slot so that you can stick in a micro SD slot card for additional memory. However, out of the box, that slot is empty. So you've got 12 gig of storage versus 16 gig of storage out of the box. So it's maybe a little closer than you might have thought. Talk about the batteries a little bit. The EVO Design has a 1,520 milliamp hour battery, while the Epic 4G Touch has got an 1,800 milliamp hour battery under the covers. Now that might seem like a much bigger battery, but you also have a much bigger display over here draining the power from the battery. So that might be kind of an even sort of thing, just a tip-off there. And both of these use Android 2.3. We have Android 2.3.4 in the EVO Design, while we have Android 2.3.6 in the Epic 4G Touch. So a little newer version of Android 2.3 over here on the right. Now let's get down to weight. Although the EVO Design is significantly smaller footprint-wise than the Epic 4G Touch, it actually weighs more. It weighs 5.2 ounces versus 4.6 ounces here with the Epic 4G Touch. Pretty interesting. However, some of you might still like the smaller, more compact size of the EVO Design. So we're going to say that the EVO Design gets a layup with that one. One more thing. Now, of course, both of these use Android, but the Epic 4G Touch uses a Samsung overlay, which is called TouchWiz, and basically you have to go back and forth to get from page to page. When you get to the end, you're kind of stuck at the end. Here with the EVO Design, you use HTC's Sense 3.0 user interface, and that means you can just go around and around and around and around. And when you get to the end, you can kind of flick it off and do a barrel roll and come back to where you started. So that kind of adds a fun aspect over here to the HTC EVO Design. Okay, this is Wirefly's Mobile Madness all March long. This is where you get to make the call as to which of these phones is going to be the winner. So go to Wirefly's Facebook page and you pick the winner. Hey everybody, this is Bob Kovacs here at Wirefly. Thanks for watching.